Hey guys, this is Jason Wampler, your host of another episode of the Rocket Minute. Um, anyway, I keep cutting myself off. I don't really necessarily need you to see my face. I just want you to see what I'm doing right here. This guy, I made the mistake. I made these stationary motor housings with the threaded inserts, and I've been working on this yesterday and today. This build is not as quick as the other ones previously. I'm getting a little bit more elaborate. I'm also being more thorough and detailed about my work. But you know what? I just realized that I could have been shooting a video the whole time. I could have shot probably about an 8-hour video. Total fabrication process has gotten me to this point. I could have edited it down to an hour and it would have been had spectacular for YouTube. It would have had plenty of production value because my kitchen doesn't look that bad and neither does the bedroom. But you know what? I'm still learning. Um, so I think what I'm going to do is commit to editing and shoot really long videos that I'm not in a hurry to shoot, and then just edit it down to 20 or 30 minutes, not even an hour. And that way I pare things down to their absolute necessity, and I make a video that's full of the good stuff. Like editing a movie, you shoot 4 or 5 hours of film, you pare that down to two hour feature film, ends up in the theater. You keep the good stuff. So, but what I'm ready to do, if you can see these zip ties, I'm zip tying these in place. I've got a 4 square pattern that I'm limited. I need a larger workshop. You can see that 4 square pattern right there of motors and the end. I've also got the launch lug. You'll see the detail. Oh my goodness, where's this camera on this dumb thing? Okay, here, right here, there's a metal tube inside. Um, it's shimmed up by electrical tape and glued in place. I didn't get a chance to show you that. It runs the entire length of this gray transition neck, part of the fuselage, the lower part of these rockets. And then I fabricated these guys. This is thin walled PVC. Kind of hard to explain. It's hard to find this stuff. Usually you can track it down at Lowe's Hardware. Some lawn and sprinkler suppliers or plumbing and sprinkler and plumbing and gardening supply centers may have it, but it's hit and miss. Everybody likes Schedule 40 PVC, which is the thick stuff. The thin wall PVC tubing has limited application and it's not as weatherproof, or it is weatherproof. It's just more brittle than something with twice the wall thickness. I fabricated these 1, 2, 3, 4. I put I don't know if you can see this or not, but I've also put then this is a multi-step shimming. Again, it's hard to see, but the bottom tape is the mounting tape. Top tape is electrical tape, and that was as precise as I possibly can. I've mounted the fuselage. I'm a little wary of this particular fuselage material because the lightness is makes it very fragile. The other thing is it's so light it's going to leave this huge low weight gap in the middle of the rocket. So I'm probably going to have to put a golf ball in the nose cone to balance it out. And I don't like to do that. I like the rocket to weigh slightly the same all throughout with a variance between center of gravity and center of pressure, of course. But I like the weight of the rocket to be somewhat even throughout. I mean, within 20 to 30% of all its materials. This stuff is really light. It's fragile. It's long. If I bump it too hard, I'm going to end up cracking it or folding it. And the stuff, I have to put a heat cooling baffle. Oh no, wait a minute. I'm using, what am I going to do? Well, I'm not sure if this is big enough for me to be using RC HEI ignition system on. So I'll have to figure that out. But if we use a traditional separation charge to get the top and bottom half of this rocket apart, if you play the recovery system, then I'm gonna have to use something that's cool burning, because black powder, flash powder, is gonna melt this material. It's guaranteed. It's done it before; it'll do it again. I was counting on using an RCHEI ignition system, but there again, shucks. Oh, I'm sorry. That's for the motors. That has nothing to do with the recovery system. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to use some type of elaborate cooling baffles. I may have to break down and set up an account from McMaster Car go online and get some heat exam. Well, the heat, I say blast proof is phenolic, but heat proof would be something like Garolite double X. I need a 1/4 inch wall Garolite double X disc, and sandwiched with copper coil scrubbers or scrubbers sandwiched in between by about 1 inch, and with a bunch of holes in it that allow the separation charge to blow through and separate the top and the bottom. It is going to have a deployment and electronics unit because I don't think I'm going to run an AC. Well, I'm going to have to do it because it's a multi-engine rocket. However, I could run pressure from separation charge from the motors, which are right here. These guys, these are the motor casings. If you can see them, they're probably about no more than 6.5 inches long, with the head end and the nozzle. That's going to shorten the length of 5 inches. They're a little bit less than about 25 millimeter in diameter, which leaves space for phenolic sleeving, which takes up more interior space. So the head end, the bulkhead plus the nozzle, and the sleeving from the phenolic, which you can get from Master Car, is going to reduce the interior volume. I'm sorry, of this motor tube. Excuse me, I'm sorry, by about roughly 20%. With the core, with a 1/3 core, that equates to about that motor being about probably an H 165, 170. I'll have 4 of those times 4. That equals about a little less than a 400 Newton meter engine. This places me in the high end J range. However, I'm not sure what type of fuel I'm going to use and how fast it's going to burn, so that affects overall burn rate. I want this rocket to be a first working prototype of this type, plus the other ones I'm building. So now there are 7. But I want this rocket to get probably about between 3,000 to 5,000 feet of altitude, if that's possible. That depends on the length of the total burn time. Total impulses, of course, as you know, the volume and pressure, basically the pressure of the flow, times the amount of time the motor burns, how long the motor takes to burn before it reaches the separation charge, etc. The rocket coasts throughout its apogee flight for the various stages thereof. But I'm just worried about the structural strength of this material. This is sodium vapor light, tube light insulation. It's inexpensive, but it's very slight. And here's the thing: I could have gone to, and I have a few funds left. I could have gone to Paragon Plastics today. That's my other vendor supplier, and those guys are awesome. They got me polyvinyl 3-inch tubing for my level 2 rocket. The problem is this stuff again is flimsy. It does break down with super glue, so I keep saying this: you really need to use epoxy with this particular plastic. It's a very light grade polyvinyl. It stands up to a little bit of temperature in outdoorsman environments, but it doesn't stand up to super glue. If it's compromised in any way, shape, or form by any type of heat or chemical reaction, then that's it. The material is done. You cannot refurbish, rebuild, or repair it in any way, shape, or form. If it's integrated with the rocket's airframe, guess what? You can't even salvage or cannibalize the rocket frame. You have to throw the rocket out. And I'm thinking right now my success level is probably right at 50%. So 50% of what I launch breaks up and is not recoverable, nor is it relaunchable. So that's about the going rate right now. Anyway, when I get out of the experimental stage, which will never be, then I'll have more of a 80 to 90% rate of success with my launch vehicles. Okay, so we're going to start in on fabrication technique. Lecture is over, and here we go. Now I gotta put this way out front. This rocket, this stupid thing is going to just fall right over. But here we go. I need you guys to see what I'm doing. We're not ready for these yet. I'm shooting a short video. I have to be in Costa Mesa before 4:30 today, and it's getting close to that time now. We're at the 9-minute mark. We are going to use this stuff. It's HFT super glue. It is available. And of course, it's backwards because I'm shooting out the front of my front camera. So, so if you're seeing an image of me, it's actually backwards. So if I seem like a nice guy, I'm really a jerk. I think this stuff has already been pierced. No, it has not. Well, let me get the one that has. So I'm pretty sure I used one of these. Yeah, I did. Okay. No, neither one of these have been pierced. So, the exterior is solid on the top. So what I need to do, I'll put that tool away, is get a small piercing object, something with a sharp tip on it. I'm using these finish pliers. I just purchased these. If you're doing electrical or electronic on your rocket, you can't do without these. You zip tie stuff together. You have to have a finished a pair of pliers. So that half-cut zip ties are really, really sharp. That's polymer and the Teflon. It gives them the ability to stretch and take high temperatures. But if you don't use these finish wires, because the angle of the pinch is downward, close towards the base of the subject you're cutting, and so you can get that close cut right there. If you don't do that and you're doing fine electronics, you're going to scrape your hand on the remnants of that zip tie. Anyway, what I'm going to do, though, the reason I bring this up is I'm going to pierce this cap right here to get the glue flowing. You notice there's a little bit on the tip, so I got to wipe that off, because if I don't, I store these pliers and I store them compressed together, then unfortunately they're going to stick together and they'll be junk and I'll have to buy a new pair. They're not expensive, but what really costs me is my time. I guard my time jealously, because ever since I got in aerospace, I'm on some type of time work. So with these 4 powers, I'm going to glue the rocket motors along this ridge right here. You notice I've done double zip ties to hold these motors in place, and I've also used double-sided tape to temporarily hold them in place. That's standard procedure. For me, that's been standard procedure for almost 5-6 years now. So that's actually a good 5 years. So we pierce this tip, and what we're going to do is we're going to place a very, very, very light amount. Here, let it just sink in. Just a very, very slight amount. Okay, so these are taped together and taped to the fuselage. I'm going to say each one of these tubes is going to carry 160 Newton pounds from each one of these, the fuel grains in one of these motors. So I may end up doubling up on my effort in some areas. But I want to show you some finishing techniques too that I've discovered. Now this is the same thing here. I really made a mistake not shooting a bunch of videos that have led me up to this particular point of completion for this rocket, because I could have taught you a lot of things, but mistakes are made. I'm going to continue building these rocket airframes, and eventually one of these days I'm going to launch them. Eventually I'm going to get out to a meet like with the club I'm part of right now, which is SCR, Southern California Rocketry Association. By the way, the gentleman's name is Martin. I can give you his information. He lives in Fullerton as well. We meet at the Santa Fe Dam recreational area on Saturdays or Sundays, and sometimes on holidays, either Fridays or Mondays, always between 8 a.m. and 12 noon, because after that we need to clear out of the place because other people need it. The other thing is we have to clean up afterwards. I didn't know you had to scrub the clay tiles that serve as blast plates for the launch rods, but bring out a bucket, some water, and some dish soap. We got to clean those dumb things up too, and then winding up the conduits and the wiring, the ignition leads, RCHI ignition systems. If I get them to become popular, those wires leading to the ignition leads will be a thing of the past. But RCHI ignition systems are a long way off. I just need funding to develop a shop and just test the darn things, but it's all about funding. So I need more money. I'm applying for grants. I'll talk to some other people. I've made my intentions known to PTAC nice girl named Luz Velasco. I'm involved in some other aerospace projects. Aerospace. I don't want to do anything else. Okay, so I've got the glue in here. Yeah, just kind of let it settle in. Give this stuff some time to dry. Keep the zip ties on it. Do the best you can. You've got 2 different axes to worry about, and I'll tell you which ones they are. By the way, I'm watching Lethal Weapon 4, and it's a little on the loud side, and I think I need you guys to hear what comes next. Oh my god, that guy's getting run over. Hold on a second, I'll be right back. I'll walk over to this thing. Yeah. Okay, there you go. Now I can hear myself think. It's really important when you're lining these motors up. When you line something up with a long axis of the rocket, you have 2 axes to worry about. Not necessarily 3, but 2. Imagine a center line running down the middle of the secondary fuselage piece that's in the dead center middle of the rocket of this piece. And these rocket motors have a center line. These rocket motor housings, the permanent housings, ones that are glued and taped to the fuselage. We're going to use other fastening methods as well. I'll talk about that later. But they have to be aligned. The imaginary line that goes... Boy, I'll tell you, man, the field of vision for this camera is not that great. That's okay. I'll just hold it like that. The imaginary line, while the glue is settling... Yeah, I've done both sides. By the way, you don't want to use too much glue because it's going to pour out. It's going to drop on the carpet. It's going to get on your clothes. So be careful with that. And you know what? Some already has. I am talking too soon. Oh my word. So wipe that up. These are disposable rags. Believe me, don't develop an emotional attachment to them. They wear out. You're going to get new ones. With this, the long axis of this motor, the visible line down the center middle, because these are tubes, they're not squares or oblongs, obloid shapes, whatever, has to be aligned with the long axis of this motor, or this body tube, and that transition body tube, and this lighter section body tube, the main body tube. But that's not it. In addition to that, I apologize, there are 3 axes. Then, in a level, if these 2 fuselages were the same diameter, you have to be able to sit it on level ground, flat level ground, and line them up that way as well. That's actually another way. I'm sorry, I reversed. That's another way of lining the long axis of this tube with the long axis of that tube. However, there's another axis. You need that you need to worry about. I'm not saying that right, because oh my goodness, here I'm talking about not doing that, and it's doing it right now. I've got a work carpet, and I'm getting more spots on my shorts. Well, I tell you, that stuff just comes shining through. Well, anyway, I got to keep an eye on the glue. I don't use accelerator anymore. I don't like that stuff because it discolors and it reacts with chemicals on the PVC, causes stuff to discolor. It works great with polycarbonate and with ABS and with even fiberglass. The super glue is the greatest, but depending on the application too. But we're lining up with the first axis, and that the long axis of this tube, the long axis of this tube, imaginary line down the center middle, long axis of this tube, and this tube, and this tube. They have to be lined up as well. But there's a specific pattern for a 4-engine Lilly class 4-power rocket. That's 2 joined together on one side of the rocket and 2 joined together on the other side. So if you wrapped a rubber band around these 4 motors, you would get a flat square pattern, or as also known by you geometrists, a rectangle shape. Okay, so what's the hang up with that? Well, number one, these 2 go together, and that's fine side by side, but these have to be placed at the right angle. These 2 motors here have to be placed at the right angle on this tube with these motors. Otherwise, you're going to have 2 flat planes that are close to each other. The way you check that is gluing these 2 motors together, gluing these 2 motors together, gluing one set on the body, and gluing another set, and using a couple of right angles to make sure there's nothing off. Or the better thing to do is glue a two-pack set of motors together Actually, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. Well, the better way to do it, excuse me, the fail-safe way to do it, which is what I do, and I should have mentioned this first. When you mount one motor, you just have to watch the long axis of the imaginary center line of the rocket motor, imaginary center line of the transitional fuselage that of course you're trying to line it up with. So you could put the imaginary lines on a flat plane, and there wouldn't be any chair wobble because it'd be an absolute dead flat surface. Okay, so you go to the other side and you do the same thing with another single motor. However, this is a challenge because this circle right here is the outer diameter of this circle is less than the outer diameter of this circle here. So you have to, when you put the first one on, just measure, make sure the long axis line up. The second motor, make sure the long axis line up, and you got to be paying attention to something else. You have to pay attention to the fact that this motor, the rise and fall between the two, between now three circular objects, which is from a dead end shot, there's enough space up here between this height and that height, the side height and the center height, as there is on the center height and side height of its companion or a complementary companion temporary motor housing, or that second larger circle is larger. These two circles are the same. This circle is different from both of them. So imagine a center line, and center line. And oh boy, here we go. I'm getting more glue on my person. Oh my word. I just love that feeling. Yeah, nothing like cyanoacrylate gluing itself and your fingers together. By the way, cyanoacrylate is really dangerous for little kids. If your kids work with stuff and they glue their fingers together, they're not going to get their fingers apart. Full-grown adults like myself end up ripping out flesh from their fingers to get their fingers apart because super glue fuses human skin very, very, very quickly. It has medical application, but I don't know much more about that than that. So with this, when you got the two here, and you got these two motors here, you're setting them individually 180 degrees opposite of each other. If you can measure the degrees and get it that way, that's fine, but you'd have to do back, middle, and front because you don't want these long running axes tipped to one side or the other unless you want to make a rocket that spirals when it's thrusting throughout the air. So you get these lined up and set in place. If you really want to be orthodox about it, now zip tie them down and then line them up, but make sure the space between the top of this, the bottom of this, and the zero space between the bottom of the two larger diameter objects, basically the 1 and 3 numbers of a removable motor permanent motor housing sections are. So a space even on top and even on the bottom. And again, check that space in the back, middle, and front. Space between the top of this motor or this intermediate tube, the permanent motor tube, the back, middle, and front. You just do one in relation to the other because it's the same as doing one in relation to the other in opposites. So 1 plus 2 equals 3. If you put 3 equals 1 plus 2 on the other side of the equation, it's the same thing. So 6 to 1, half dozen the other, literally. So anyway, I'm really putting some pressure on this fuselage, so I want to reinforce the fuselage. Okay, so the next step to setting the second step of motors is after you've evened every single pant leg, because you're making a pair of pants for a four-legged individual. I've actually seen a woman with 4 legs, and a guy married her, and she was just gorgeous. I just can't imagine, what the wedding night was like. But anyway, you want to have this asymmetrical setup. You don't want to have a set of 2 motors closer to the other set of 2 motors on one side or the other. You want things even and symmetrical. That makes for a more stable flight for the rocket. You light something that's very, very large scale, experimental with very powerful motors. You can create a real hazard. You can kill somebody. And even some of these smaller rockets can get really dangerous. So you want to make sure and ensure to take the time in advance to build a stable flying rocket. Okay, so I believe the glue still needs some time to dry. So I'm going to leave these zip ties on. When I was setting up these guys, the threading here, and let's just go back here. On this table, I think I made this stand too tall. Which is kind of funny because I made it tall so that it would reach, and now it's overreached. Um, I'll just hold this in my hand. These threaded inserts, these are off of gray ABS or gray PVC, excuse me, gray PVC tubes for irrigation purposes. I just cut them short. But you know what? I missed telling and showing you guys how to mount these tubes or mount these fittings into these tubes. But I do want to show you this. I used fiberglass tape, which is readily available for about $1 a roll. I got it from a 99-cent store. I went back lately and they don't have any there because the 99-cent store, to maintain their lower pricing strategy, they sometimes buy new old stock. And if any time a restaurant or some type of business goes out of business, they have packages and packages of stuff for retail that just never sold. Well, then the buyers for 99-cent store, they turn around and they buy it for pennies on the dollar. This stuff is fiberglass tape. It doesn't quite look like fiberglass, and it's really hard to work with, but if you're accomplished, it's laid out in a grid pattern that makes it easier to cut once you get used to how you use it. It can be almost impossible. If you don't have a talent or a passion for this, this stuff is going to make you frustrated and literally want to jump up and down on the rocket and crush it and destroy it, and just go take up something like underwater basket weaving, or dirt motorcycle riding a motorcycle on dirt, or running for president. One is just a little better than the other. So anyway, when I set these guys, I use this tape and I run it around, just using this for an example, around the circumference of this to shim these up, because the outer diameter of these pieces is a little less than the inner diameter of these tubes. But that's okay. I want that space so I can use the shims, and I use the shims for a reason. They're fiberglass, and here's where the super glue comes in. Is you glue them, you wrap this stuff, which is like, it looks like really strange, very, very loose surgical mesh. Of course, it's not for medical purposes. You wrap these guys, and you maintain a tight wrap, and if you wrap them clockwise, if you're looking at the back ends, you rotate them counterclockwise to get them to fit in the actual stationary motor housing tubing, and you set them to a certain height. That's just one other thing I want to talk about, because this is a really detailed approach. This is an experimental rocket, but we do our calculations, we do our work correctly, it will fly. Now, a couple of things you want to line up. 3 things you want to line up. The base edge of these stationary motor housings, after you fabricate them, sand them down, and you got a best square cut on the end of them, which is 90 degrees to the flat edge of this particular surface. So let's see, 4 times 90 is 340. I got that right. And then setting the deck height of these inserts to match one matches the other. And your best bet is not to set one high and try to pull these things out and set the rest of them high to match the other one. This is to set the lowest one and leave at least some of the threading protruding. I'm sorry. My goodness. All this technical talk has put me to sleep. Guys, I talk my own technical and I put myself to sleep. That's really, really bad. I'm not kidding. Though maybe I should drink some coffee when I do these videos. I'm yawning. I'm about ready to fall asleep. I'm slurring my speech. And I sound crazy. So there's that to line up. There's these guys to line up after they've been fabricated correctly. So the deck height of these fittings has to be even. And I'll show you later. But I'm not going to keep assembling this rocket until I'm shooting a video doing it. Okay, and then I just glued my skin. Some more, oh my goodness, some more glue is migrating out. Cable man is doing some work upstairs. I got some glue migrating here. I'm going to wipe that up, and probably some on the other side. Well, I haven't had as much of a problem with glue migrating, but after 5 years working on one particular style of rocket, I'm finally starting to learn. My problem is I'm not doing this as aggressively as I should. I should be more steeped in aerospace. I'm just kind of goofing around with social services, just kind of scrapping by. I do have some disabilities that I won't talk about that qualify me with Social Security disability, but all the same, learning is not one of my disabilities. Okay, so we talked about setting the deck height of these, and I'll tell you about that later on, because these guys actually right here, I've got to get the labels off. That really frustrates me to do it the way it did. I got to shim and glue these up. Same thing, fiberglass tape. But in this case, I'm probably going to end up using high temp epoxy, because epoxy is just a more superior fastener or fastening material, or it's more of a long lasting, stronger bond. But anyway, these guys, this surface will get wrapped up with fiberglass tape, and then it will be epoxied. So I actually am really making fiberglass shim for this, and I insert that in there like that. This is quite a bit of length. I might end up cutting up this, because now I just remembered I've got this space taking up the head end, whereas I don't need. Well, I still need a bulkhead too. Wow, I'm probably going to end up reducing these to G. I'm probably going to end up reducing these mortars to G80s, which that's still 240 newton pounds to thrust. That's a big I motor, so I may still be okay. But these are going to be probably the shortest motors I've ever made. So, and even with these pieces heavily modified, I'll cut it down there. But the farther this particular piece works its way into this motor tube, it takes up space we use for fuel grains. So I'm shooting for 240. My goodness. 4 G80s in a row. Well, at least I can have legal access to them. Actually, I have more than legal access because I have my level 1 certification. So these times 4, we'll do that. Maybe later on tonight I'll shoot another video, depending on how fast this video uploads. And so that's that. So we're almost done. I just want to talk about one other thing. And when mounting these multiple motors, the phone keeps making that. We're at the 31-minute mark. You see that they're angled here at the top. Well, if you have an angle cut on a tube, and you want to line these up and get them to look halfway decent, you have to do one of several things. I only did one, but at the very base of the bill, the highest round of brown part, you have to mark or notch that with a red notch. It needs to be actually, if you have an air sander or an air file, just go ahead and put a V divot in the highest point of the frontmost front of the dip down here, and that's where you line that up again with the long axis of the intermediate fuselage itself to align it. And I got to tell you, man, I need some stimulants. I don't want to drink Coke, because Coke actually has cocaine in it. I'm not kidding. I'm serious. But I got to drink some really strong coffee. I think I'm going to do that after this, because I talk technical and I put myself to sleep. But, you have to pay attention to this stuff because it's important. You want a rocket that flies stable. So anyway, but the thing is, these angles have to be relative. The flat plane of the angle has to be at a right angle at a center plane that goes down the middle of the right angle of the motor tube itself, that intersects with the long axis imaginary line, which is also lined up with the imaginary line of the fuselage portion it's lined up with. And that flat plane goes down the middle of these two imaginary lines and lines up. Where that flat plane is at a right angle, this plane, this shaved portion of the tube needs to be, and so forth and so forth. Repeat that 4 times. So there's something called right angle mechanics. It's a form of geometry that I've invented. However, I think somebody else has probably thought of it first. Not necessarily one of my contemporaries, but mathematicians and geometricians, or what do you call somebody who's a geometrician? What would you call Dr. Catherine Goebel, who was, in my opinion, Dr. Catherine Goebel, worked for NASA. She was a black woman, and she was a super genius, and she's one of my personal heroes. But again, you get the point. I built a rocket with three fuselages back in back in the year 2002. My uncle saw it and he was impressed, but I just didn't have the know-how to complete the darn thing. And it probably, without the motors, it still weighed like 30 pounds, pure ABS. But I was saying to myself, I had to mount a nose cone that was ogive, not straight conical, and I had to do them at an angle, and I had to fare them into the center fuselage. Otherwise, the airflow would have ripped them right off the tops of the respective fuselages that were mounted to the side of the center fuselage. And I had to devise a way to do that, and do that on a belt sander and keep everything kosher. It was a very, very, very complex process. I just barely managed to do it correctly, but wow, that was hairy. Those nose cones cost me nearly $50 a piece off the internet. They're very large, 4-inch diameter nose cones, very, very expensive. And these guys know that if you're going to buy a 4-inch diameter nose cone, it's going to be reinforced because you're going to be using those 4-inch nose cones on very, very high powered model rockets. I'm talking stuff that actually shoots off the ground like a missile from an A-10 Warthog, I like a Sidewinder missile. So I'm working with really powerful stuff. And model rocketry is fun, but it can be dangerous too. But again, all in the interest of building a stable flying rocket. Okay, so I don't want to go much further because we're at the 35-minute mark, and I said this would be a short video, but I think I'm going to start shooting very, very, very long videos. But if they're mostly lecture like they were today, then I can't edit that much. The problem is with my phone. I did get this from Metro PCS, but I think I should have gotten the other phone that was a little bit better. Which also reminds me, I've got to download some. I've got to offload some material off of my phone, so this video will upload more quickly on YouTube. So I can't let myself forget that. This is kind of an ugly area. I had to do some repair work at the very end. This is a fuselage mount, and this is the length of the fuselage. Actually, most of my arms can't stretch that long. But there's also a rule of proportions. When you're designing and building your own rocket, there's something called a rule of proportions, or proportional appearance. If it looks functional and proportional, it's probably going to work okay. You may have to shuft some pins or nose cone weights around. But if it looks reasonably proportional, like it is going to fly stably, then check your calculations by math formula or by a downloadable program off the internet. There's a gentleman I keep forgetting a reference, but he shows the math principles in regards to calculating center of pressure and center of gravity. And let me explain what those two are. Center of gravity is where the rocket's at rest, where it'll balance, like it'll balance on your finger. Okay, this thing's got something going way back. So let's see where the center of gravity is on this. Right now, it's just above. It's right about there. All right, right on the slope there, right there. That's right, the center of gravity without the motors attached, without the electronics, the nose cone, the recovery system. Center of pressure is different. It's what I thought it was. It's the center of balance of the rocket as it's while it's under thrust, while it's flying throughout the air. That is a critical calculation. Even I have to refer to other people on how to do that. If you don't do CG and CP calculations, center of gravity and center of pressure calculations correctly, if you don't do those correctly, your rocket will corkscrew off the pad and destroy itself. Nothing, including the solid rebuildable motor systems, may be recoverable at all. You're going to suffer a great financial loss, and it'll be very disappointing. So we'll talk about that more later. I'm going to add a link to the description of how to figure out center pressure and center of gravity. But in those two respective sentences, usually center of gravity is taught first and then center of pressure afterwards. Center of gravity is easy. Center of pressure requires a very, very long, elaborate calculation. Don't use a computer to figure it out unless you know how to use computers. It's better to try and write things down and use a math problem. There's a really nice kid. I forgot what his name is, but I'll look him up again on the internet. I divulged that information, his adventure or his information on the phone, or not on the phone, on one of my videos. And he, of course, liked that. He's got more viewers, more subscribers, and more likes because of me. So I couldn't imagine he'd be upset about me doing that. And he's a really nice kid. He's probably less than 30 years old. I'm 53. I'm a late bloomer. But I've been building rockets for 23 years. I've been designing aircraft and rocket probably since I was like 10 years old. And I've had a strong, ongoing passion for aircraft and rockets ever since. For aircraft, yes. Rockets started in 2000. That was another story. Okay, so one other thing I want to talk about is mounting this fuselage on these compound soft shims. Let me let me get something to wet my whistle here. We're going into the 50-minute mark here. This is probably one of the longest videos I've shot. There we go. A little bit to hot cocoa to wet my whistle, like this container. But anyway, so here it goes. When I did this shimming, I used double-sided tape. That's look at there. You can see the double-sided tape, but the double-sided tape is fairly thick, and if you add it up, you can't shim it down. The outer diameter of this piece had to fit in the outer diameter of this particular piece because this thin-walled material has an odd wall thickness to it. I'd want something next time with at least twice the amount of wall thickness. But the problem is calculating the amount of space you're going to have to take up to make this surface meet this surface out of the buildup of this part of the surface here, the shimming tape meet the inner diameter of this surface here, because that's the whole point. This is the rest of the rocket. Use at least 2 points. You don't need to use 3. It's not a high power rocket where you're strapping actual rocket motors to a rocket that's nearly 2.5 stories tall. And people do that for recreation. They spend tens of thousands of dollars on it, and they form teams, and they have colorful t-shirts, and they do it for fun, and it's a boatload of fun, but it's very expensive. That these shims, they have to be built up to the same evenness and then compressed and worked with. The best thing to do is build up a shimmable surface with a couple circles of double-sided tape, but they have to be equal length, and they have to butt end. So with double-sided tape, you have to use one section of tape at a time, and it has to meet at the back end of that single-sided tape, and then you have to take the backing off. Here's the problem with double-sided tape that presents a challenge for shimming up the rocket like this if you choose this method for shimming for transitional tubes. This stuff I got $2 a roll from Harbor Freight. It works wonderful. 3M is garbage. Stay away from it. 3M does not work. I don't know why. As you can see, it's only sticky on one side because the back side is removable to expose the adhesive on the front side. Let's see that right there. Well, if you wrap this, you can keep wrapping it. That's fine. But it's only sticky on one side, and it's gonna do what's called a Chinese finger cuff on you, where it's gonna pull forward. You have to take a section of this and calculate the circumference of the area you're shimming up, and one even piece of tape, and the back end of that tape needs to butt it against the front. Take the backing off, then line up another piece of backing tape on the top of that. Take the backing off. The whole time you're gonna have to wonder. 1 millimeter of compressed material gone down, one more even 1 millimeter section of compressed material to go. But the problem is, if you go and if number one, you've got to do these strip by strip by strip, one strip after another. You have to stagger where the ends and the beginnings start, because otherwise the stuff will clamshell and pop away like a big C, and it'll fall off the fuselage. So you have to stagger placement of those sections of double-sided tape. 180 degrees off constantly while you're peeling off the backing. And the backing, if you don't have the right fingernails, you're going to have to spend about a couple hours doing that. If you keep rolling in a spiral, it's going to have a sticky side stick to the slippery side, and that'll just break loose. And like I said, form a slinky, not a shim. So you build that up, but you can't go in 1 millimeter sections all the way up to the outer diameter of this, to the inner diameter of this clear tube, which is the main fuselage section, which is the way I've designed this rocket. So what you have to do, you start with this, you get close, and then once you get to that point, you use an old standby. This stuff is $1 roll. You can get electrical tape rolls of electrical tape. You can get a whole loaf of electrical tape rolls for like $10 and it's cheap. The stuff is cheap from Lowe's, Home Depot, or Harbor Freight, or 99-cent store, or even Walmart. Now I want to talk about the stuff you can get at Walmart versus the stuff that you should not be getting at Walmart, and the liabilities of the other places, what you shouldn't get, what you should not be getting at the Harbor Freight, that you should be getting at other places, and who's the best for electronics, the people, such and so forth. This tape is one-sided, so it's not going to pull a backing off. So you wind it in a spiral, and here's what you do: you keep winding it until you overshoot. So that way, if it's too large, you just keep pulling it back in 2-inch or 4-inch or 6-inch sections until you get a tight fit. When I mean tight fit, I mean you shim up this surface to fit inside that surface, but if it's too tight to fit in because this surface is built up with the tape too much, all you do, put your nail underneath of one contiguous strip of electrical tape. You pull it back. You go 4 to 6 inches at a time. Cut that piece short and throw the short piece away, and then check the fit. If you have to do that a lot, you might want to consider exactly what it is you may have done wrong, or if there's something wrong with the main fuselage that may be causing it to be ovoid. So be careful. Pay attention to the transition. Pay attention to the secondary fuselage piece and the primary fuselage piece. Make sure that neither one of those are ovoid. If they're ovoid and not circle, or if they're pill-shaped, or something's been damaged, it's going to throw your readings off. And again, even if you refer to YouTube, not YouTube, but even if you refer to the internet, I got to tell you, folks, if you don't have practical hands-on mechanical and fabrication experience, you are pretty much going to be going down a difficult road, and you're going to have to teach yourself, because a lot of this stuff is not taught, or it's either taught incorrectly. So you shim that up, but the good thing is you cut the tape back, peel the tape back by 4 to 6 inches, check the fit. You want a tight fit, but you don't want something that's so tight you have to press it in and rotate it by force. Don't rotate it. Don't rotate it or force it at all. Just put in some slight pressure that way to make it slip in. You want this to maintain the straightness with the long axis, that imaginary visible line down the secondary lower fuselage piece that holds the motor housings. But you want this to be aligned somewhat with this body tube. Now, I've seen people, a gentleman who got a Schedule 84-inch diameter PVC housing, and he put really just crap, sloppy electronics in it that just looked like something out of Dr. Seuss' nightmare. And he built kind of an unusual engine. And he put automotive paint on it from an automobile parts store. And then when he did the fins, he did what's called a wide X. In other words, all 4 of the fins on the rocket's fuselage were not 90 degrees apart. A couple of them were 120, and then the other two were 60, because subtract 100. If you subtract 240 from 360, that's 120. Split it in half for the other 2 fins, that's 60. So you had a goofy arrangement of fins. He made the same mistake I make, and it's been amateur hour for me for the first 20 years. The last 3 years of building rockets, I've gotten better. And you know what? He showed a video. He got that damn thing into orbit. The only problem he had was the fact that car parts store spray paint was actually peeling back on the fuselage because it didn't handle the friction. That rocket went transonic and it went into orbit. And he was taking video the whole time. One single 10-foot long, 4-inch diameter, Schedule 80 PVC plastic tube. The lightweight stuff that they used to sell, they don't sell anymore. He got the damn thing to orbit, and I'm thinking to myself, if I put a little bit more oomph and finesse in my rockets, I calculate the CG and the CP, I'm better with electronics. I'm also an electrical engineer, and I put some aerospace paint and glues on it. I should be able to do pretty well too. Obviously, this design is a lot more elaborate and complicated. I enjoy elaborate and complicated only because I have a strong sense of aesthetics. But as an engineer, I like to push myself. I like to challenge myself. Hey guys, it's been a lot of fun. I'm enjoying myself. I talk 1,000 miles a minute. A couple times I've almost put myself to sleep, which is one of life's ironies. And it's humorous too. But what's even more funny are my looks. And so I don't want to talk about that. But you guys have been really patient. We're at the 50-minute mark. My phone is going to be tied up. I may not even get to shoot a video tomorrow. Let's just see how it goes. But tomorrow, if we do get the chance, we are setting up these fittings with these motor tubes, and we're going to take it from there, okay? And then we're going to fit this assembly to the back of this assembly and even up the pant leg, and we'll be doing that times 4 because there are 4 of them. And these guys will be only good for G80 motors, I suspect, maybe even less. I just want to get a rocket with a total of 200 Newton pounds of total impulse. So the 50 for each engine, so that's barely a G, but 47s are Gs, so 50 would barely be a G too. Oh well, such is life. Anyway, my name is Jason Wampler. This has been another very, very long episode of the Rocket Minute. It is instructional. It'll put you to sleep, but still hit the like and subscribe button. Show some love, have some mercy, and we'll take it from there. All right, thanks a lot, you guys. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you tomorrow.